On 3 days' notice, Glory MMA Fitness' own Crash, Kevin Croom, he's going to be taking on Brian Boom Kelleher. And this is the battle of onomatopoeias. John Madden would be smitten. But Matt, when I look at this fight, for Kevin Croom, such an interesting guy coming into the UFC. I mean, when you look at his record, somebody's going to go, what? And then, huh? Why? I mean, what are we doing here? And you look at it, yes, he has some very decent wins. I mean, he's beaten Felony Bennett. He's beaten Derek Minner. He's beaten guys like Lenny Wheeler, you know, from Prince Edward Island. But overall, it is a weird body of work coupled with a guy who has the oddest fighting style. And for Croom, that's exactly what it is. He'll throw certain punches from his waist. He'll throw overhands. He'll throw straight shots. He has weird leg kicks, weird setups. Very interesting wrestling as well. And if you look at his last fight against Alex Caceres and you just look at the numbers at the page, I mean, it's like the hot dog car sketch from I Think You Should Leave. It's f***ing dog shit. I mean, he went 1 for 16 in takedown attempts, but credit where it's due, Alex Caceres, Underhook City, able to use his body positioning and just his overall strength to get the win in that fight. And between rounds 2 and rounds 3, James Krause in the corner of Kevin Croom said, listen, you don't have any confidence in your strikes. Absolutely hate to hear that in a fight, but that is what we heard. Now, if you look at Kevin Croom's UFC debut, he took on Roosevelt Roberts. Not a lot of people thought he was going to win that fight. And that one wasn't at featherweight. That one was at lightweight, too. Kind of crazy.
It really was. But hindsight being 2020, beating Roosevelt Roberts isn't that big of a deal. Like, it's cool, but it's not something that, we're going to tell, like, our grandkids about one day. This is the interesting thing about this fight. With Kevin Croom on short notice, I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem for him because he does have such a wonky fight style. Like you said, like, I feel like, preparing for Kevin Croom's a nightmare anyways because you're just expecting so much over and over and over again. So Brian Kelleher probably knows what he's signing up for right now. But how happy was Brian Kelleher this morning when he figured out Said Yacoub fell out and now he's fighting Kevin Croom? Because, listen, everybody who likes MMA likes Brian Kelleher. He's one of those, like, Patrick Beverly types in basketball. He's just like a farmer. He wakes up every day, goes to work, and just does his job and goes home. But Kelleher now has a pretty favorable matchup against Croom. Like, with Croom and his very reckless style, he leaves himself very open to big counter shots. And Brian Kelleher, at least at this stage of his career, the easiest comp in the UFC, he fights a lot like Jim Miller now. What does Jim Miller do? I try to hit you with big counter shots in the feet, and then if those open up submissions on the mat, I can then submit you. Does that not sound exactly like how Brian Kelleher approaches MMA? It does. And the thing about Kelleher, too, is he never tries to go outside of his own game. Like, remember when Chris Weidman lost to Luke Rockhold? He threw that terrible spinning back kick, gets his back taken, and gets ground and pounded for 4 minutes? I never watch Brian Kelleher and think, he's going to automatically go for, like, a Showtime kick off of the fence. I have a pretty good idea as to what Kelleher is going to do. And yes, he does struggle against those top-tier wrestlers. He does struggle against the very, very good technicians on the feet, just because he is one of those well-rounded guys where, let's say you're a really good wrestler, but your striking's not great, I can take advantage of that, or vice versa. You're a great striker, but you have weak wrestling. Kelleher can always sort of do the opposite of what his opponent does well. And with Croom, I just don't think Croom has any one skill that stands out above Kelleher's, even though they are both so well-rounded.
Red Rover, send it over to me. This fight is supposedly, and this is off of MMA Fighting, and I will read you word for word what they have on their site, because this was announced 2 hours ago. Multiple people with knowledge of the promotion's plans confirmed the news to MMA Fighting on Wednesday. Kakrakhmanov being knocked off the card was first reported by My MMA News. And then it goes on to say Kevin Croom in talks to accept the fight, which would take place at featherweight. So this one at featherweight, Brian Kelleher has some experience at featherweight, but his fight against Said Yacoub Kakrakhmanov was supposed to be at 135 pounds. So an added little bit of a wrinkle. Now, we've seen fighters have short notice replacements, have weird bits of gamesmanship, like Robbie Lawler having to take a fight at 185, where, listen, they were able to get the win. For Kelleher, again, he has that experience in his back pocket. He has very high-level experience against really good fighters. I mean, you mentioned it. Yes, he struggled against certain wrestlers. He has a loss to Cody Stamann that, depending on how you look at it.
Don't watch the John Lineker fight because it makes you feel bad for Brian Kelleher.
And the John Lineker fight, and he has a loss to Jimmy Rivera very early on in his career. He also has 2 wins over Julio Arce, who really turned it on at 45 and then back down at 135. That's an interesting turn. But when I look at this fight, I mean, for Kevin Croom, a perfect 20-0 amateur record. His 7th pro fight was against Justin Gaethje. Like, Croom has also been in the fire. He's also faced some very top-level opposition. Again, the no contest against Roosevelt Roberts overturned to that because it was a great first-minute submission in the fight due to the weed. So, unfortunate there, but Nevada State Athletic Commission, they've softened their stance on that, so hopefully we don't have an issue in this one. But I look at it for Kelleher, again, takedown defense, 59% in the UFC. when you're taking on a guy like Croom. And Croom, again, his takedown accuracy in 2 UFC fights is 6%, but you can't look at that like, oh man, that's dog shit. Because it is, but it's not.
I'm gonna disagree just a little bit, but please hear me out, because I do agree with sort of the overall sentiment of your point. With Croom, he does just spam a lot of takedowns. Like, I don't look at his wrestling style and think, wow, he's like a Ricky Simone who was able to wrestle Brian Kelleher, who can chain their single legs to their double legs. With Croom, it's just a lot of activity that you have to keep up with throughout 3 rounds. And that's something that Kelleher's game very much is styled towards. And if Kelleher does have to match you volume for volume throughout the first 2 rounds, and then it becomes one of those kind of blood and gut style fights in the third, I like Kelleher in one of those fights, because the thing with Croom is it's that aim big, miss small mentality. Croom will get a little bit wild, and he will get desperate with his strikes, with his takedowns, and Kelleher has that finishing ability to where if you do start to overextend yourself, if you do reach for a takedown, that's when you eat a big uppercut. If you do put your head in a bad spot, that's when you're on the receiving end of a submission. And the thing with Croom is that, yeah, he is a great grappler, but he is a 50-50 grappler. Like, it's not unheard of for him to get submitted, because he does go for so many takedowns. He can sometimes wrestle himself into exhaustion, and then if he ends up in a bad position from one of those takedown attempts, like we've seen a lot of times, a guy gets tired even though he is having a lot of success with the wrestling. He's not, I don't want to say give up, but he might give up one position that he thinks he's safe in, and the next thing you know, you're in a rear naked choke and you're tapping. Croom can find himself in those positions. Again, I'm not saying Kelleher is going to win by submission, but it wouldn't be the most surprising thing at all if Kelleher could find a guillotine up against the cage.
I mean, for Kelleher, his last time out, took on a longer, taller opponent in Domingo Plarte, was able to win that on all 3 judges' scorecards, 30-27. Absolutely dominated that fight, had 12 minutes and 49 seconds in control time, and landed 236 of 279 total strikes. He put on a masterclass. For Croom, his last time out, 1 of 16 in takedown attempts when he took on Alex Caceres. The judges' scorecards, 30-27, 2 30-26s, and that was like, hey, Alex Caceres, this guy's been around. He's fought Max Holloway. Let's get him close up to the top 15 once more. And let's fight Sungwoo Choi. So, Matt, I mean, Caceres, he's on the way up. For Croom, he's in a weird spot. I mean, listen, neither one of these guys spry chickens in terms of the age. Kelleher's 35. For Kevin Croom, coming in here at 34. Both guys looking to make moves. One of them in the wrong division. One of them against the guy who's not in his division. It just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense other than, hey, UFC, I'm doing you a solid, and if I win, maybe you give me another contract. So we look at this one, no odds on it yet as of Wednesday night, not even any Tapology votes because this fight was just announced. But when I look at this one, I mean, Kevin Croom, 5 inches of height and 9.5 inches of reach. I mean, listen, I like Brian Kelleher in this fight, but I stay away from it.
I was going to say, if size ever did matter in a fight, this would be the fight. Because I think we can both agree. Is Brian Kelleher the better striker? Yeah, he's the better striker. Does he have the more refined submission game? Well, probably. I've seen him go out there and get, not one-shot, one-kill submissions, but you get the idea. Like, if he latches onto something, guys are normally out there tapping out. But I do think with the size and reach disadvantage, it's going to be so hard for him to just consistently accumulate damage. And I know Croom does crash a lot of distance, so he's going to be helping Kelleher in some respects. But unless you think Kelleher can just sort of catch him coming in, hit him with one of those big, like, one-punch hitter quitters, I just don't really see how Kelleher is going to be able to get a decision win if he's not able to get the finish.
Yeah, so, I mean, you look at it, too, for Kelleher, yes, he's able to beat certain guys. And, I mean, you look at it also, remember that quick fight against Montel Jackson that was a little wonky? Longer guy, submission abilities. You see what I'm saying? There's definitely giant avenues for Kevin Croom to get a win in this fight. It's one that we're definitely going to be covering a lot. In question mark kicks, that's 2 hours before the prelims. We get the view of hindsight as to how these guys look on the scales at weigh-in day on Friday. But again, 2 hours before the prelims, QMK with Fight Night picks. We'll get a final look at Brian Kelleher and Kevin Croom. I'll look at the odds, and we'll get the fans involved in the chat. So look out for that. You'll get the notification out there if you're not subscribed already. I can't wait for this card. We also have another short notice edition, Charles Rosa taking on Downtown TJ Brown. If you haven't checked out that video yet, check it out as well. Listen, this weekend, now it's really shaping up to be an interesting card. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.